The lodge fell silent in an instant. A chair scraped, a fork clinked, and all eyes turned to my groom, Nathan Cole, as he stumbled toward the exit in his perfect tuxedo. He didn't make it. The music faltered, laughter died, and for a breathless second the only sound was my own heart hammering. I raised my glass and thought, this night won't end the way anyone expects. My name is Harper Reyes. I'm a librarian in Boulder, Colorado, more used to cataloging quiet than creating chaos. We had chosen this mountain lodge for its view of the Flatirons, the pine air, the promise of fairy tale photos. My parents, Jorge and Linda, worked tirelessly that morning. He checked the ceremony arch like it was a bridge he designed. She passed out bottled water with a nurse's steady hand. Nathan's parents fussed over linens and practiced toasts. Everything looked flawless, at least from the outside. But I'd been watching Nathan all morning. He was jittery, missing buttons, mumbling through smiles. Just nerves, he insisted, though his hands shook even as he poured coffee. I tucked away the worry and focused on the day, until my phone died an hour before the ceremony. I needed to text my sister Sophia in Vienna, who had just started architecture school and couldn't fly home. Without thinking, I asked Nathan for his phone. He hesitated a beat too long, then handed it over. The screen lit up before I could type. A message slid across the top. Sophia, I miss you. Don't pretend today. I can't stand it. My breath caught. Another came almost instantly. Remember the chateau woods? Wish I were there. I froze. My sister. My fiancé. Words no bride should ever read. My pulse roared as I scrolled just far enough to see weeks of messages, flirty, intimate, undeniable. Sophia, the girl I'd helped pack for Europe, the one I promised to support. Nathan, the man I was minutes away from marrying. I set the phone down between us. Tell me the truth. Nathan's face drained. It was a mistake, he whispered. We got confused. We. He swallowed. Me and Sophia. The room spun. I felt cold, not angry yet, just emptied. My sister, thousands of miles away, and the man beside me, woven together in a thread of betrayal. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. Instead, I said calmly, we'll go through the ceremony. The guests deserve their day. But after tonight, we're done. Relief flickered across his face, like he'd escaped. He didn't realize the reckoning wasn't canceled. It was simply rescheduled. In that moment, my plan came together. No violence, no shouting, just one sharp reminder that humiliation cuts both ways. I wouldn't ruin the entire celebration, but I wouldn't let him sail through it either. I chose a small, precise act, tucked neatly into the flow of the evening. The ceremony itself passed like a rehearsal, flowers, music, vows that felt paper-thin. Cameras flashed, guests cheered. Nathan smiled like he still owned the day. But I knew what waited. Later, in the reception hall, glowing with string lights and chatter, the toast began. Laughter rippled, glasses lifted. Nathan raised his champagne, confident again. I raised mine too, steady and silent, waiting for the plan to unfold. Because some betrayals can't be left in the dark, and some weddings are meant to end with truth, not promises. The ceremony unfolded like a play we had all rehearsed too many times to forget. Children scattered petals across the aisle, the quartet played a slow, practiced prelude, and everyone rose when I entered. To the guests, it must have looked perfect. The mountain backdrop, the arch wrapped in eucalyptus, the bride in ivory, the groom smiling beneath the canopy. Only I knew that beneath the lace and flowers, the foundation was already cracked. Nathan took my hand, squeezing it just long enough for the cameras to capture devotion. His eyes searched mine for forgiveness, maybe even for partnership in the lie. I gave him nothing. Pastor Klein began the script, her voice clear against the Colorado wind. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped into place, and the guests erupted in applause. No one suspected that I had already promised myself to leave him as soon as the day ended. Photos followed, family groupings, bridal party poses, candid shots against the red rock cliffs. I smiled when prompted, though my cheeks ached from the effort. Nathan kept close, his arm always around my waist, as though holding me tighter could erase what I had read on his phone. The irony was sharp. Everyone admired how radiant we looked together, not realizing I was standing beside a stranger. By the time we entered the reception hall, String lights glowed over long banquet tables, and laughter filled the air. Guests clinked glasses, waiters carried trays of hors d'oeuvres, and the band tuned their instruments. It was the picture of joy, yet for me, every detail felt like a stage set, temporary, fragile, destined to collapse. I had decided earlier, in that quiet room with his phone burning in my hand, that I wouldn't ruin the day for everyone else. Guests had flown in, gifts had been wrapped, money had been spent. My parents deserved to celebrate their daughter, even if the man at my side didn't. But I also knew I couldn't let Nathan finish the night without consequence. Betrayal, especially one that intertwined blood and promise, couldn't be smoothed over with cake. So I chose a simple act, hidden in plain sight. It would not scar anyone else, it would not harm him permanently, but it would deliver what I needed: a public reckoning, a moment when the mask slipped and he could no longer perform. My revenge would be quiet, sharp, and perfectly timed. Dinner was served. Speeches began. Claire, my maid of honor, spoke first, recalling late-night study sessions in college, our shared love of books, and the moment she knew Nathan and I would marry. Her words drew laughter and applause, and for a fleeting second, I wished the world could rewind to the days when I still believed in his smile. Then came Nathan's best man, spinning stories of college pranks and loyalty. Guests roared with laughter. Nathan laughed too, glancing at me as though daring me to share in the illusion. I raised my glass politely and said nothing. Finally, Dennis, his father, stood. He spoke of Nathan's ambition, his steady character, his future as a husband and leader. "A man you can trust," Dennis said proudly, his glass lifted high. The words echoed in my chest like a cruel joke. It was the cue. Waiters poured champagne down the long tables, filling every glass. Nathan's was topped off first, golden bubbles rising to the rim. Mine followed. Crystals sparkled under the string lights, every guest poised to toast. Nathan lifted his flute. His smile returned, broad and confident, as if nothing could touch him. He glanced at me again, the picture of a groom ready to bask in the glow of admiration. And I smiled back, softly, serenely, as though the secret between us wasn't already loaded into that single glass. Pastor Klein raised her hands for silence. "To Harper and Nathan," she announced. "May their love endure like the mountains around us." The room erupted in cheers. Glasses lifted. The band struck the first notes of a celebratory tune. Nathan took a long sip, still grinning, still basking. I mirrored him, my glass touching my lips, though I hardly tasted the drink. My eyes never left his. It didn't take long. His smile faltered first, the corners twitching. His brow furrowed, then smoothed again as he tried to recover. He set his glass down, stood a little straighter, and looked around as though searching for escape. The crowd continued laughing, oblivious, raising their glasses for another cheer. I stayed perfectly still, my hand resting lightly on the tablecloth, watching him unravel. This was not cruelty for cruelty's sake, it was balance. He had humiliated me in the most intimate way possible, tying my sister into his betrayal. I had chosen a humiliation of my own, one that would echo in every guest's memory. Nathan excused himself, a stammer caught in his throat, and took an unsteady step away from the table. A ripple passed through the room as people noticed. Some assumed nerves, some too much champagne, others just fatigue from the long day. But then he took another hurried step, and whispers rose. I didn't move. I didn't chase him or soothe him. I lifted my glass once more, calm and deliberate, and let the room see a bride who was no longer bound to pretense. When the doors swung shut behind him, the hall filled with murmurs. Guests exchanged confused glances, forks clinked against plates, and the band faltered. My mother looked at me, worry etched on her face, but I shook my head. This was mine to carry. I rose, holding the microphone left from the speeches. My hands didn't tremble. "Thank you for being here tonight," I said evenly. "You deserve to know that after this evening, Nathan and I will go our separate ways. An hour before the ceremony, I discovered he was unfaithful with my own sister. I chose not to cancel the day, but I will not hide the truth now. Consider this both a celebration and an ending." Gasps broke across the room. A few guests covered their mouths. Others exchanged sharp whispers. Carol dropped her glass. Dennis sank into his chair. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears, but she gave me a small, proud nod. I placed the microphone down gently, smoothed my dress, and sat. Around me, the hall buzzed with shock, disbelief, and fragments of sympathy. But within me, there was only stillness. For the first time since the message lit up Nathan's phone, I felt whole again. The hall never regained its rhythm. Once I placed the microphone down, the chatter fractured into uneasy clusters, guests whispering in corners, bridesmaids exchanging worried glances, parents frozen in their seats. The string lights still glowed, the band still clutched their instruments, but the illusion of celebration had already shattered. Carol, Nathan's mother, looked stricken, her manicured hand pressed against her chest. Dennis leaned forward, staring at the table as though numbers might appear on the wood to solve what words could not. My own mother reached for me, her touch gentle, while my father stood tall beside her, his jaw clenched, daring anyone to challenge me. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Claire rose, walked to my side, and placed her hand firmly on my shoulder. She told the truth. She said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. It wasn't much, but it gave the room permission to exhale. Some guests began gathering their things, embarrassed to stay. Others whispered apologies, as though they had personally failed me. A few, mostly Nathan's closest friends, looked furious, though whether at me or at him I couldn't tell. What mattered was that no one left unchanged. The band tried to recover, easing into a soft instrumental piece, but the notes fell flat. Plates of half-eaten entrees cooled on tables. Waiters shuffled awkwardly, unsure whether to keep serving or to retreat. The lodge's event manager appeared at the edge of the room, clipboard in hand, scanning the scene like a stagehand watching a play collapse. I stayed seated, hands folded in my lap. The weight of my words settled heavy and final, yet strangely steady. I had feared trembling, chaos, maybe even regret. Instead, there was clarity. Betrayal had rewritten my wedding day, but truth had written the ending. When Nathan finally returned, the room fell silent again. He was pale, his bow tie crooked, his eyes darting everywhere but at me. Guests stared as he walked stiffly to his parents' table, whispered something urgent, and sank into a chair. Carol looked at him with horror, Dennis with something closer to rage. Neither spoke aloud. I rose once more, ignoring the thrum in my chest. "Please," I told the guests, "enjoy dessert, enjoy the music if you wish. But this evening is finished for me. Thank you for coming, for celebrating what you thought would be a beginning. Sometimes the truest gift is knowing when to close a chapter." A hush lingered after I sat down again. Slowly, the crowd began to dissolve. Some drifted to the dessert table out of politeness, nibbling at cake with nervous smiles. Others left quietly, their footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. A few approached me directly, my aunt squeezing my hand, a coworker whispering, "Proud of you," an old neighbor nodding in approval. Each gesture stitched a thread of strength back into me. Eventually, my parents guided me out. Claire carried my veil, folded neatly over her arm, as if to spare me the burden. Outside, the mountain air wrapped cool around my shoulders. The stars had come out, bright and sharp against the dark sky, utterly indifferent to what had unraveled below them. We drove home in silence, headlights carving through the canyon roads. My mother held my hand the entire way, her thumb brushing lightly as though to remind me that I hadn't vanished with the wedding. My father kept his eyes on the road, his expression firm, protective, unwilling to let sorrow take the wheel. Back in my childhood bedroom, I sank onto the bed still in my dress, the layers of fabric crumpling around me. The bouquet lay abandoned on the dresser, petals already wilting. For the first time all day, I allowed myself to cry, deep, heaving sobs that shook every corner of me. Claire sat beside me, holding a box of tissues, saying nothing. She didn't need to. When the tears finally slowed, she whispered, "You were braver than anyone in that hall." I shook my head. "I don't feel brave. I feel broken." "Sometimes," she said. "They're the same thing." I lay awake long after everyone else had gone to bed. My phone buzzed endlessly on the nightstand, messages piling up, friends, coworkers, church members, relatives. I didn't open them. I couldn't bear to see the mixture of sympathy and gossip. Not yet. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and repeated one truth over and over: I did not cause this. I revealed it. The lodge, the lights, the champagne, all of it was already gone. What remained was me, in a borrowed silence, deciding how to live with the story I had just written in front of everyone I knew. And though exhaustion pressed heavy on my chest, a small flame flickered in the ashes, I had chosen honesty. For myself. For my future. Even if the cost was everything I thought I wanted. Morning came heavy. I woke in my childhood bedroom, still tangled in the folds of my wedding dress. The house was hushed, only the faint clatter of my father in the kitchen breaking the silence. My eyes were raw, my throat sore, but the tears had dried into something steadier, resolve, maybe, or just exhaustion. My phone blinked with dozens of unread messages. The subject lines and previews were a blur of sympathy, outrage, and speculation. I can't believe it. / you were so strong. / how could he? Some messages came from people I barely knew, distant relatives, acquaintances from town, parents of my students. News travels fast and bolder, faster still when the story has drama stitched into it. I scrolled a little, then set the phone face down. I didn't want to be consumed by other people's opinions. Not yet. Mom came in quietly with a mug of coffee, setting it on the nightstand. "You don't have to get up today," she said. Her hand brushed my hair back from my forehead, the way she used to when I was a child with fevers. "Rest. Let the world spin without you." But the world refused to spin quietly. By noon, Claire texted. "The video's online." Someone from the reception posted it. My stomach dropped. I opened the link and saw myself, standing in that hall, microphone steady in my hand, voice clear as I revealed the truth. The clip was already being shared, comments stacking beneath it like bricks. Some called me brave. Others called me cruel. I closed the tab before the weight could crush me. Nathan's name trended locally. Rumors flew. He had left town. He was hiding at his parents' house. He had gone back to Vienna to find Sophia. None of it mattered. What mattered was that his carefully built image, the charming account manager, the devoted son, the future husband, was crumbling in real time. That evening, my dad sat with me on the porch. He stared out at the trees, his hands folded around a mug of tea. "I know you feel like you lost something huge yesterday," he said. "But what you really lost was an illusion. And illusions don't last. What lasts is truth." I nodded, though the words were hard to hold. "People are saying I embarrassed him." "You didn't embarrass him," Dad said firmly. "He embarrassed himself. You just refused to keep the secret." His certainty steadied me. For the first time since the ceremony, I felt like maybe I hadn't destroyed my life. Maybe I protected it. The following days blurred with calls and visits. Some friends arrived with casseroles and flowers, pressing my hands and telling me I was courageous. Others stayed away, their silence saying more than words. At the library where I worked, colleagues sent notes of support, though I caught whispers from a few who thought I'd gone too far. Even in kindness, there was division. Nathan tried to reach me once. A short message appeared on my screen before I blocked him. "We can fix this. Please talk to me." Fix! The word rang hollow. Trust isn't a vase you glue back together. Once shattered, it will always show the cracks. One night, unable to sleep, I opened my laptop and began writing. Not about Nathan, not about Sophia, but about myself. I wrote about standing in that hall and feeling my voice steady when everything else broke. I wrote about truth as both weapon and shield. I wrote about betrayal not as the end of me, but as the start of something I didn't yet recognize. By the time dawn streaked the sky pink, I had pages of words. They weren't polished, they weren't for anyone else's eyes, but they were mine. And for the first time, I felt lighter. At church the following Sunday, I slipped into a back pew. Heads turned, whispers rose, but Pastor Klein met my eyes with quiet respect. Her sermon was about light, how it exposes, how it heals. "We fear the breaking of illusions," she said, "but sometimes what feels like destruction is really revelation." Her words pierced me. I sat straighter, letting the truth of them settle in. I hadn't destroyed anything that was real. I had only revealed what was already broken. That afternoon, I walked a trail near Chautauqua Park. The mountains rose steady, unbothered by human drama. Wind rustled through pines, carrying the scent of earth and rain. For the first time since the wedding, I breathed deeply and felt the air fill me instead of scrape me raw. Yes, my marriage had ended before it began. Yes, I had been betrayed by the two people I should have trusted most. But I was still here, breathing, walking, choosing what came next. And that was something worth holding on to. The first Monday back at the library felt like stepping into a room I'd rearranged in the dark. Everything was where I'd left it. Circulation desk, new arrivals table, the corkboard advertising chess club and composting workshops, but my body moved through it differently. I shelved returns until the rhythm steadied me. Biography, essays, poetry, stories. A grandmother brought her grandson to get his first card. A teenager asked for help finding a book with a happy ending but not fake. I smiled and led him to a shelf. We compromised on bittersweet and honest. Most patrons were kind. A few were curious in the way people are when they think compassion comes with a side of questions. One woman hovered at the desk and finally blurted, "You poor thing," like grief was a costume I'd forgotten to remove. I stamped due dates and said, "I'm okay," and meant it in the small, ordinary way, breathing, working, moving forward. At lunch, my manager sat beside me in the break room and slid over a yogurt without comment. After a minute, she said, "We've got your back. If anyone crosses a line, send them to me." It was the kind of quiet solidarity that does more than speeches. Letters still arrived at my parents' house, envelopes with sharp or shaky handwriting. Some I kept, blessings from old neighbors, a note from my second-grade teacher, a card signed only from a woman who stayed too long. Others I read once and recycled, a stranger's lecture about forgiveness, a both sides treatise that treated deception like a scheduling conflict. I learned to stop auditioning for other people's approval. Truth doesn't need a panel. On Wednesday, I opened my email and saw Sophia's name. The subject line, "I don't expect you to read this." I almost clicked away. Then I didn't. The message was long, full of sentences that stumbled toward ownership and then stood there out of breath. She was sorry, confused, foolish, lonely. She wrote about Vienna, like a city that had swallowed her whole and left her reaching for the closest familiar hand. She said she loved me. She said she'd failed me. She did not ask me to forgive her today, only someday. I typed 3 replies and deleted them. The 4th I kept. "I hear you. I need time. Do not contact Nathan again. I'll write when I can." I hit send and cried in that quiet, private way grief teaches you. No drama, just a slow leak of something heavy you've been holding too long. Nathan didn't write. His silence felt strategic, like a press release that never went out. I heard, through the town's soft grapevine, that he'd taken leave from work and was staying with his parents. Carol mailed a check to my parents for expenses, as if money could sweep the floor of what had shattered. My mother returned it without a note. Dennis called my dad to apologize for our side of things, and Dad said, "There aren't sides. There are choices," and hung up. That weekend, Claire insisted on getting me out of the house. We drove to Netherland, walked around the lake, and ate grilled cheese on a bench. "I keep waiting for the part where you say you're fine," she said. "And I get to tell you you're lying." "I'm not fine," I said, "but I'm not lost." She bumped my shoulder. "You're allowed to be both." On Sunday I tried a new service at a church across town, one where no one knew my name. The pastor, a woman with a voice like warm cedar, preached about the difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking. "Peacekeeping keeps the table tidy," she said. "Peacemaking tells the truth, even if it means clearing the table and starting over." I felt the words land somewhere sturdy inside me. Life didn't become a montage. It became a series of small, faithful acts. I filled a tote with gifts from the reception, duplicated appliances, registry whims, and took them back one by one, explaining lightly when asked. Plans changed. I mailed thank you notes that said what was true. Your kindness mattered on a hard day. I folded the dress into a garment bag and set it in the back of my closet, not as a shrine, but as a solved problem I didn't need to look at. A 12-year-old regular at the library, Maya, stopped by the desk with a stack of fantasy novels. "My mom said you were brave," she announced, very serious. "I think being brave is like being a wizard. You don't always get to pick when you use it." "Sometimes it picks you," I said, "and sometimes you just keep going." She nodded as if we'd settled something important and trotted off. I stood a little taller the rest of the afternoon. When the county clerk's office finally processed the paperwork, no marriage to dissolve, only signatures to void what never legally began, I walked out into the bright, high-altitude sun and didn't feel lighter, so much as clearer. The line I'd drawn on the reception floor had made its way onto paper. The state agreed with what my body already knew. That night, I cooked dinner with my mother, nothing fancy, just pasta and tomatoes that tasted like August. We ate on the porch while the sky turned the color of a ripe peach. "You know," she said, twirling noodles like a thought, "you were always the kid who put the right book back on the right shelf. I worried that one day you'd think that was your job with people too." "I did," I admitted, "until I remembered I'm not the library." We laughed, and it felt like opening a window. At school, the new term crept closer. I drafted a unit called Telling Hard Truths, anchored by novels where characters choose honesty over reputation. I didn't plan to tell my students my story. Kids hear enough adult noise. But I would teach the skill my life had demanded, how to speak without cruelty and stand without apology. On a Friday in late September, I drove up Flagstaff Road after work and parked at an overlook. The city spread below like a patient constellation. I thought about the wedding night, the microphone in my hand, the choice I made to say the quiet part out loud. I thought about Sophia's email, my father's certainty, the grandmother's library card, Maya's wizard theory. A breeze came up the canyon and lifted the hair at the nape of my neck. For the first time, the memory of the reception hall didn't make my stomach knot. It just lived where it belonged, behind me. As the sun dropped, I whispered a promise I could keep. I would build a life that didn't require me to disappear inside it. I would let ordinary days do their slow magic. I would keep telling the truth, even when only I was listening. The lights of Boulder blinked on, steady and human. I stayed until the last streak of pink faded from the sky, then drove home with the windows down, the night air clean and new. Winter came to Boulder with quiet snow, softening streets and slowing traffic. By then, the story that had once defined me was mostly a whisper, something people recalled only when they passed the lodge or looked at old photos. Nathan had faded from conversation. Sophia stayed in Vienna, her email shorter, respectful of the distance I needed. Life, as it does, kept moving. At the library, I hosted a new book club called Fresh Starts. We read novels about reinvention, about characters who learned that endings were really disguised beginnings. Patrons laughed, cried, and argued, and every time I locked up afterward, I felt steadier. The dress never returned to my closet. I donated it to a shop downtown. One afternoon, I walked by and saw it in the window on a faceless mannequin. Instead of grief, I felt relief. It was no longer mine to carry. On New Year's Eve, I stood with Claire on Pearl Street as fireworks cracked over the mountains. She nudged me. "Your year, Harper. It starts now." I believed her, because the truth had already set me free. And freedom, I realized, was the best vow I could ever make.